There's a particular isolation that comes with being good with words. You know how to explain things, how to articulate feelings, how to give language to what others struggle to name. People come to you when they can't find the right words. And you help them find either the phrase that captures what they mean, the sentence that makes sense of their confusion. But when it's your turn, when you're the one struggling, the one in pain, the one who needs help, something strange happens. The words are there. You know exactly what you'd say. You can construct the perfect sentence in your mind. But you don't say it. And the silence becomes its own kind of suffering. When you're articulate, people assume your internal life is already organized. They think, if you can explain it, you must have processed it. If you can put it into words, you must be handling it. But articulation and resolution aren't the same thing. You can describe your anxiety perfectly, the tightness in your chest, the spiraling thoughts, the physical sensation of dread, and still be drowning in it. You can name your loneliness with precision, its texture, its weight, the specific quality of the akia, and still feel completely isolated. The ability to language something doesn't dissolve it. But people don't always know that. And so they hear your eloquence and assume you're fine. They mistake your clarity for stability, your self-awareness for self-sufficiency. And you start to notice, the better you are at explaining yourself, the less people think you need help. There's an irony there. The skill that should make connection easier, being able to communicate clearly, actually creates distance. Because clarity can look like competence. And competence doesn't seem to need support. Here's what happens when you're good with words. You know how your pain will sound before you say it out loud. You can hear it from the outside. You can predict how it will land. You can imagine the other person's reaction. And sometimes, that imagined reaction stops you. Because you know that if you phrase it too well, if it's too polished, too articulated, it might sound rehearsed. Manufactured. Like you're performing vulnerability rather than actually being vulnerable. So you hesitate. You think, if I say this exactly right, will they believe I'm really struggling? Or will they think I've constructed this for effect? And there's a real concern there. Because when you can put pain into perfect sentences, it can seem less urgent, less raw, less real. The very eloquence that should help you be understood becomes a barrier to being believed. You're caught in this strange double bind. If you don't articulate well, you won't be understood. But if you articulate too well, you won't be taken seriously. So you calculate. You edit yourself in real time. You try to find the balance between clarity and rawness, between being understood and being believed. And that calculation, that constant monitoring of how your words will sound, is exhausting. It turns asking for help into a performance. A task. Something you have to get right. And when something requires that much effort, it's easier to just not do it. Articulate people tend to be self-aware people. You understand your patterns. You recognize your triggers. You can trace the origin of your feelings back to specific moments, specific wounds. You know why you're struggling. You can explain the mechanics of it. And that self-awareness creates another barrier. Because when you understand yourself that well, asking for help feels redundant. You think, I already know what's wrong. I already know where this comes from. What's the point of saying it out loud? Help feels like it's for people who are confused. Who need someone to help them make sense of things. Who don't have the language yet. But you have the language. You have the understanding. So what are you asking for? And this is where articulation becomes a trap. Because you can describe the problem so well that it feels like you've already addressed it. Naming it feels like handling it. Understanding it feels like resolving it. But it's not. Understanding why you feel lonely doesn't make you less lonely. Knowing why you're anxious doesn't dissolve the anxiety. Being able to articulate your pain doesn't mean you're not in pain. But it creates the illusion that you should be able to handle it yourself. That if you understand it, you should be able to fix it. And when you can't, there's this shame. This sense that you're failing at something you should be good at. You have all the tools of the language, the awareness, the insight, and you're still struggling. What does that say about you? There's another fear that stops articulate people from asking for help. The fear that if you really let someone if you gave them the full picture, the complete articulation of what you're experiencing, it would be too much. Because you know exactly how to say it. You know how to paint the full landscape of your internal experience. And you're afraid that landscape is too dark, too heavy, too complex for someone else to hold. So you portion it out. You give people the manageable version. The digestible summary. The, "I'm going through something but I'm okay" version. Not because you're lying. But because you're protecting them. You're protecting them from the weight of really knowing. From the responsibility of being the person you told. From the discomfort of not knowing how to respond. And maybe you're protecting yourself too. From the vulnerability of being fully seen. From the risk that even your most precise articulation won't be enough. From the possibility that someone will hear everything you're carrying and still not understand. Because here's the fear underneath. What if you say it perfectly, every word exactly right, every nuance captured, and they still don't get it? What if your best attempt at being understood still results in being misunderstood? That feels worse than not trying at all. At least in silence, you can tell yourself, maybe if I had said it differently. Maybe if I had found the right words. But if you use the right words and it still doesn't land, then what? Then you're left with the reality that maybe language has limits. That maybe some things can't be communicated, no matter how articulate you are. And that's a lonelier thought than staying quiet. Here's something that makes this even more complicated. Articulate people are often the ones helping others find their words. You're the friend people come to when they can't explain what they're feeling. You're the one who listens, who reflects back, who helps them make sense of their confusion. And there's something meaningful in that role. Being trusted with people's unformed thoughts. Being the person who can give shape to what's nebulous. But it also creates an identity. You become the person who understands. Who has it together. Who doesn't need the same kind of help you give. And after enough time in that role, asking for help feels like a betrayal of the dynamic. It feels like changing the terms. Like burdening people who depend on you to be the stable one. So you hold it. You continue being the person people turn to, while privately struggling with things you can't quite turn to anyone else about. Not because you think you're above needing help. But because the role you've inhabited doesn't have space for it. And shifting that role, admitting that you need what you usually provide, requires a kind of vulnerability that feels harder than the original pain. So what does it take for articulate people to actually ask for help? Sometimes, it's hitting a threshold. A point where the cost of silence becomes greater than the fear of speaking. Sometimes, it's finding someone who doesn't need the perfect explanation. Who can sit with the messy, unpolished version. Who doesn't need you to make it make sense. Sometimes, it's recognizing that asking for help isn't about having the right words. It's about admitting that words aren't enough. That you need presence, not just understanding. Company, not just insight. Someone to sit with you in it, not just help you explain it. And maybe that's the shift. Asking for help doesn't mean articulating everything perfectly. It means letting someone be with you in the parts that can't be articulated. The parts that are just feeling. Just struggling. Just hurting. No language required. No perfect phrasing. No performance of vulnerability. Just the raw, quiet admission, I'm not okay. And I need you to know that. Not to fix it. Not to understand it completely. Just to know it. That's asking for help. And for articulate people, that might be the hardest sentence to say. Not because they don't have the words, but because it requires putting the words down. If you're someone who's good with words but struggles to ask for help, maybe it's worth considering this. Your articulation is a gift. Your ability to give language to experience is valuable. But it's not a substitute for connection. And connection doesn't always require perfect communication. Sometimes it just requires honesty. The simple, unpolished truth: I'm struggling. You don't need to explain it well. You don't need to make it coherent. You don't need to perform clarity. You just need to let someone in. And maybe that's the permission you've been waiting for. Not to find the right words, but to speak even when the words feel wrong. Even when they feel inadequate. Even when they feel too much or not enough. Because the point isn't the language. The point is the reaching. And you're allowed to reach, even when you can't articulate why. My name is James, and this is the Thinking Space. Do well to like and share.